morning, it's February 4th, and this is To My Little Friends. Well, yesterday was a chaotic day in the world of Donald Trump. The one thing you can count on with Trump is that when he makes a campaign promise, there's a high probability that he's going to follow through with that promise. And that's confounded Democrats who, like most politicians, are used to making grandiose promises on the campaign trail only to forget about them once they get in office. Well, yesterday morning, Trump announced that he would be placing a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and a 25% tariff on most goods from Canada, with the exception of energy, which would carry a 10% tariff. Immediately, both nations promised to retaliate and institute tariffs on U.S. goods coming to their countries. And I'm what most would refer to as a free trader. I believe the world would be a better place if all nations subscribed to that theory and goods and services could flow freely in the global marketplace. Unfortunately, that's not the case. In the past, I've cited the non-tariff barriers that European agriculture has placed on U.S. agriculture products. This is because Europeans have smaller farms that are less efficient, and these nations erect barriers to protect those small farmers. It's their form of nationalism, and politicians in those countries are applauded for protecting these farmers. But they do so at their detriment to larger, more efficient farming methods applied in the United States. Trump also placed a 10% tariff on goods from China. China is notoriously famous for instituting trade barriers. They also target U.S. agriculture products and do so without regard to the increased cost of Chinese consumers. But even more prevalent are the administrative barriers like inspections, quotas, and ownership requirements. They do this to protect their own industries and assure a strong measure of government control over production of goods. A business venture in China must show ownership by Chinese people of at least 51%. Getting back to what occurred yesterday, it roiled the U.S. stock markets, but Trump, being Trump, immediately started negotiating. President Sheinbaum of Mexico talked with Trump and promised to immediately send 10,000 Mexican military troops to the border to help with the immigration problem and to stop the flow of fentanyl across the border. Trump has declared the border a national emergency, something most Americans would agree was the right thing to do, but Democrats immediately denounced this move. The question that we have now is how effective these Mexican troops will be in countering both immigration and drug trafficking. I'm not sure they're going to be able to be up to the job. Sheinbaum, whose top security concern is a war between two factions of the Sinaloa cartel, said she asked for Trump's help in stopping the smuggling of weapons to Mexico that ends up in the hands of the cartels. Trump's going to have to live up to that part of the agreement. Then we have the situation with Canada. As with Mexico, Trump was on the phone with Prime Minister Trudeau, and voila, an agreement was reached. While the immigration problem on the northern border is less than the southern border, it remains a growing problem, with more enforcement being in place at the southern border. With drug problems have been growing in Canada, and the Mexican cartels are active in our northern neighbor. U.S. Border Patrol seized 43 pounds of fentanyl at the northern border with Canada last year, a fraction of what was seized at the southern border. However, a series of drug busts in Canada has spotlighted how Mexican cartels and other organized crime groups have begun operating labs there. In October, Canadian police busted a fentanyl super lab in British Columbia and seized hundreds of pounds of fentanyl and methamphetamine. I had a hard time pronouncing that. The lab had enough chemicals to operate for weeks and produce 95 million lethal fentanyl doses. Trump and Trudeau agreed to work together on finding solutions to these problems. Canada last year said it would invest $900 million over 6 years to improve border security by acquiring dogs, drones, helicopters, and mobile surveillance towers, as well as deploying new border agents. The government's also speeding up efforts to better monitor and control the precursor chemicals that come into Canada. On Monday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada would put 10,000 first responders on the border following the U.S. enlisting the Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations, work with the U.S. to create a joint strike force to fight organized crime, trafficking, and money laundering, and appoint a fentanyl czar to oversee the efforts. Now, time's going to tell if these agreements with our North American neighbors actually work. This will be the true test. Trump has agreed to suspend the tariffs for 30 days, and will monitor the actions of Mexico and Canada. I would also say they should monitor what U.S. is doing to try to control the transfer of weapons to the cartels. That leaves us with China, the primary source of the chemicals needed to produce fentanyl. In 2019, China did implement strict rules against the production and sale of fentanyl, but Chinese companies continue to produce the chemicals needed to make the fentanyl product. Chemical makers often find ways to get around regulations by slightly altering the chemicals they sell, and China's been reluctant to oppose more sweeping regulations over its chemical sector, especially when its economy has been struggling. And I suspect this is the issue that Trump is trying to pressure China with on tariffs. I have no doubt that there will be tough negotiations on this issue. I also have no doubt that China can stop the production of these chemicals if they make it a priority. China is a state-run economy for the most part, and Beijing, if they want to make something happen, they have the power to do so. In summary today, China announced the tariffs, and Mexico and Canada, and soon China, all came to the bargaining table. That's Trump's style, and we'll have to see how successful he is in getting what he wants. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening today.